Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we've got a really interesting guest, Greg Banning. Now, Greg, you are a CRO at Rithum, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about that leading e-commerce platform. So I want to learn a lot more about that before we get in here, because you head up sales globally and everything under the sun, revenue, sales, whether it's RevOps or sales engineering, it reports up to you globally. You had a really demanding job. And one thing that was just interesting when you and I were talking about just your background, one of the things that we talked a lot about was that at age 18, you were thrown into a sales position because you needed the money to help support your family. Where other kids were going off to college at major universities and everything, you were helping support your family. What I loved about that is it shows so much about your character, right? But also, there's no way you get to be the CRO of a major global enterprise without knowing how to overcome obstacles and hardships. It's just not going to happen, right? Yeah. So I would love to hear from your perspective a little bit more about what you're doing right now, a little bit more about your background before we dive in, because we're going to start talking about revenue in a big way, actually the revenue logic of customer obsession and what that means for us. And today, as we're planning and strategizing, growing our companies, what do we do? What does that mean? How do we take new insights and advice from you? But first, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background.
Sure. Steve, first off, thanks for having me to the podcast. Really appreciate it. You've built an amazing platform over the past few years, and I couldn't be more privileged to be here with your audience. Thank you for that. I head up as Chief Revenue Officer globally for Rithum. Rithum is your leading enterprise commerce, one of your leading enterprise commerce companies. So really what we do is we help brands, channels, and marketplaces come to life in commerce worldwide. So that's connecting companies, consumers on the commerce platforms, such things like marketplace like Amazon, for example, throughout the world. We've been doing this for almost 30 years, very sizable, very well respected in the enterprise space. We not going to mention any names, but select your Fortune 100, and in some way, shape, or form, we are either partners or they're a client of ours today. So that's a little bit just on the Rithum background. So that's what I do today. And yeah.
So I would love to just start out broad and then dig deeper. And the idea of the topic here, the revenue logic of customer obsession, it sounds very provocative. When you think of the revenue logic of customer obsession, what comes to mind? What's important to you heading up revenue globally for the company?
Sure, it's overused terminology, but voice of the customer, really. How hard we run today in the business world, just period overall, but in the business world, I like to say you're either unemployed or overemployed. Today, we have a lot coming at us. I get asked all the time, hey, in sales, I get your folks just starting out sales careers or younger in their leadership careers saying, Greg, what's the number one skill set I should focus or work at? I'm like, geez, get your time management down, get your priorities down, your organization down. And if you happen to be in sales, make sure that's focused on the client, the customer. I spent the entire week in Dallas with our executive leadership team doing some planning for second half of the year and starting for FY27. I wish I had a picture I could share. I don't think anybody took a picture, but our CEO, Lou Keys, took a bright orange chair from our lobby area, brought it into our executive boardroom and put it at the head of the table to represent the customer as we were going through our strategy and our planning. And the purpose of that is we recognize here at Rithum that we can get sidetracked, we can get easily distracted with all the noise, the fluidity of the marketplace, AI, right? The exponential growth of AI and what that represents and what that means. The expectation of investors, the marketplace itself, competition, etc. It's super easy to forget about the customer, the client. Not that you ever want to, and you believe intrinsically that you're keeping them at the center, but when you're chasing after profits, when you're fending off competition, when you're trying to be innovative and not only just survive, but thrive in the marketplace, you can lose track or lose sight of the customer. You can forget to stop and pause and say, wait, what does this mean to our clients? Is this what the client would want? And really put yourself in their shoes. For me, at least, and I've been around a long time, I tease all the time, I'm a 500-year-old vampire. I've been around a long time, and I can promise you, before technology really went on steroids, it was the pace of business and just life. You definitely had more time to consider and keep front and center the client, the customer. If you, being companies, organizations, executives, if you don't keep that at the forefront of your collaboration, your communication strategies, your plans, et cetera, and you don't force those conversations, if you don't do things like visually putting an orange chair visibly in a room full of black chairs, the orange chair at the end of the table, a long executive conference room, and say, that's our client. Any conversation we're having, we need to keep the client, the customer in mind. This isn't about us. We don't exist if the client isn't served, if the client isn't gaining value, if we're not going to where the client wants to be. And so that's how I would sum that up or summarize that.
So I got to tell you, I'm like coming out of my seat. I did an interview about a year ago with an executive at Amazon, and Amazon became famous as probably one of the most customer obsessed organizations in the world. Big case studies, reviews, major universities talk about it. And they have an empty chair policy that at every meeting, it could be a distribution meeting, there's an empty chair there. And so a year ago, I said, is that still a thing? And especially as we're like in a lot of virtual meetings and everything, they're like, absolutely. It's a standard part of our customer obsession. We get so distracted. We have so many things on our list to do that even on the proactive things we've got to get done and we never, ever even get to things that are important, that are basic fundamentals. Customer is our North Star. Everything we do is for the customer. But it becomes so fundamental that we don't do the things like you mentioned one word in there that we've got to be, I forget what it was now, proactive. You got to be active at going out there and making sure that you're talking and you're understanding the point of view of the customer. And I literally just today, and there's a question for you coming at the end of this next 20 seconds. She said, AI is so amazing, but it's one of the biggest distractions we have in our company because everybody's saying we have to without understanding why. And she said, one of the things that suffers is understanding our customer and putting our customer first. It was a really amazing point of view. So here's my question for you. We know back, call it marketing sales 101, customer comes first. What is the revenue logic of that, though? How does that impact revenue? You're the CRO. You guys are focused on revenue like there's no tomorrow. The next board meeting, the first thing they're going to talk about is, Greg, how does this quarter's quota look like? What is next quarter stacking up as?
Yeah.
How does customer obsession impact that short-term and long-term revenue attainment?
I think it sounds simple enough. Do the right things for the right reasons. We're in business because of whatever marketplace, whatever client customers, we decided that we want to focus in service. Right? I think, like most things, it sounds great, right? Customer obsession, client obsession, delight the customer. Right? It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to put it at the center of everything that you're doing, your communication strategies, your annual planning, your systems, your technology, your processes, the people that you hire, the roles, et cetera. I think that if you're struggling, I would say as a business, if you're not hitting your numbers, you're not hitting the expectations, I would just tell you, you have a client issue in some way, shape, or form. Broadly, you've got a client issue. Are your solutions no longer relevant or as relevant as they once were? Have you built solutions that clients really don't value any longer in whole or in part? Maybe you've got a great solution. Are you servicing the customer? You start talking about onboarding and that ongoing customer obsession. Once they become a customer, they go from a prospect, they come on board, now they're a customer. How are you servicing them ongoing, right? Do you have a customer advisory board? Do you have some kind of vehicle for voice of the customer? When you're developing your products, your solution, your services, are you getting input from your clients or your potential clients in the marketplace. So I think that how does it impact revenue? I think a leading indicator is are customers interested in engaging you, talking to you, and then ultimately partnering with you. And again, if you're not hitting your numbers, you probably have a gap someplace with the clients. Again, whether it's the solution, the servicing, et cetera, you've got some kind of a gap there. So that's always the first place that I look is the client and how are we approaching all of those pieces.
The idea of revenue and connected customer obsession. Forrester did a whole customer obsession study in 2024, just a couple of years ago. And what they found was only 3% of companies are truly customer obsessed.
I don't doubt it. I'm surprised it's that high, Steve.
But we all say we are, right?
Yes,
if
sure.
if we're ever
Right.
asked, are you customer first? Are you customer obsessed? Absolutely, right?
Yes. Yes.
But it's like you got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And they said if you are customer obsessed, your revenue grows 41% faster, profits grow 49% faster, and loyalty retention is better by 51%. So there is direct connection. And so what I loved is our last conversation is you took that connection, that focus on the customer, and then you started going in kind of concentric rings around what that means for how we operate as a business. And one of the things that you said, and you actually said this was the biggest challenge to creating long-term sustainable growth, is internal alignment. The connection here to the customer is if they're our North Star, then internally aligning means we got to align around them. A woman was on the podcast a few months ago. She's a partner at a go-to-market agency for B2B companies. And she said, it's the number one problem. She said, but the voice of the customer is the number one change agent. Everybody is willing to rally, align, and align behind the voice of the customer if it's articulated correctly. It's not then the opinion of the CEO or the CMO or the CPO or the CRO. Opinions don't get wholesale adopted by every department. But if we're not aligned and we're all going in different directions, why did you bring it up as the number one challenge to creating long-term sustainable growth, internal alignment? I'd like to hear it from your voice.
Yeah, sure. I've been focused on this for probably at least the past 15 years, what I call the connective tissue within an organization. And again, listen, you go back, everybody has the best intentions. Every department, every individual within that department. I always say, nobody shows up to be a zero. Everybody wants to be a hero. And, you know, if you're not getting the kind of results that you want, in this case, your clients aren't delighted. They're not obsessed with you, your company, or your solutions and services. You might have a connective tissue issue. So that's why I bring that up. I'll give you a recent example. Our customer success management team is managed by a different part of our organization than the sales organization.
Yeah.
We were working with a client, a large client of ours, been a client for quite some time, on a renewal. At the end of the day, sales was off working with the client in a certain department, working on expanding the relationship, working on A, B, and C. Unbeknownst to us, client success team was over here working on X, Y, and Z with different folks within that organization. And they were unaware of the sales piece. Now, obviously, we had to break down in what should be collaboration, communication systems, processes, whatever. But at the end of the day, we did not delight the customer. We actually created confusion with the customer and nothing detrimental, right? I would say we irritated slightly or maybe more than slightly frustrated the customer. Now, we found out about our blind spots there. We course corrected. Now back to being obsessed about that client and showing them that. But if you don't have the communication vehicles in place, you don't have the processes, the systems that are interlocked, you're going to miss out. It's a great example of organization businesses running so hard, so fast, attempting to do the right things. If you miss one, if you don't have the communication strategies, cadence, processes, these things in place, you're going to miss. If you do have these in place, but you don't have the commitment as an organization around them, hence the discipline around them, to make sure you're not skipping steps in the process, you're going to miss the mark. And it's really easy to do, right? So I think, product development, they're running hard and fast, heads down, trying to create this next great solution for the clients. And they might forget to check in on, hey, we're at this phase. Let's check in with our client base. Let's check in with the marketplace. Let's check in with sales and marketing and see if this is actually something that's resonating. We have established here the founding customer program. And what that means for us here at Rithum is anything substantial that we're going to do. So a new solution, an enhancement to a solution, a new service, right? We're going to add something, maybe take away something. Anything that's on a pretty big level that's going to impact the client, then we go out and we find clients that want to be a part of our founding customer program. What we do is we want you to participate in what we're developing and what we're doing. And in return, these are the things that we're going to offer you because your time and energy is very valuable. We understand that. And so they might have access now to our chief product officer has something to do with product. They might have a major say in our product roadmap for the next year or two. And that's valuable to clients, right? Because in today's world, in our case, you're not just slinging software. It really is about the partnerships and truly growing together.
I love that. I love that connection, right? That's a component of customer obsession. But I want to get back to this idea of concentric rings that help all lead back to customer obsession, which is really the way that I'm kind of thinking about it as we're talking here is optimize for customer obsession and you'll optimize for revenue. But how you optimize in internally aligning is one, you started talking and you lit up about company culture. If we're aligning as individual departments, as leaders, down to individual team members, why is culture so important to this entire equation that gets us to where we are obsessed and focused on our North Star, the customer? And where does company culture play in all that?
Sure. Listen, company culture is so important to employee engagement, discretionary effort, taking an initiative to go above and beyond what I call the extra degree of effort by folks. So all the way down to the individual on the front lines that are doing things maybe above and beyond their job description or the responsibility of their paycheck that the CEO never even knows that delights the client. You won't get that without a culture, meaningful culture where people feel valued and they have a purpose. I don't believe with any generation, any of us are just showing up to collect or want to show up just to collect a paycheck. You're going to get the minimal amount of effort if you have a culture that's based on that. If you have a culture rooted in your employees and making them first, our true north here in our sales organization is we want to create a winning, predictable sales organization where everybody feels valued, supported, enabled so they can do the best work of their lives. And the underpinning to that is ownership, grit, character, and teamwork. We talk about this in our leadership meetings ongoing, and we have a lot of vehicles to remind ourselves and our people, our sellers, that they come first. We want our sellers and our sales organization to feel like they're doing meaningful work and they're not just showing up to collect a paycheck, that they actually have purpose. They're making a difference. That's what we convey to our sales folks all the time is in our support organizations. Listen, whether the company is large or small, how you service, how you help, how you enable partner with that client in large part might determine whether that company thrives and stays in business or goes out of business. When companies go out of business, individuals are impacted, families are impacted. We don't try to go overboard with it, right? We're not curing world hunger by any stretch of the imagination, but it depends on how you want to build your culture and what lens you want that culture to look through. And so it's foundational in everything because if you are truly customer obsessed, you have got to create a culture where people are doing discretionary work. They're engaged at every level. They're not hitting the snooze button in the morning. They're excited to get up and get into work because they have purpose at the company organization that they work through. And they're not just going through the motions.
You know, and you said things in there. I'm sure everybody in your team feels like you have their back, right? A part of a culture is that you're not going to just do what's expected. You're going to take risks and you're going to do things that you think, because we all know we have to rewrite our playbooks all the time, especially in this day and age, right? So we're trying new things. And if we feel like we're going to be punished for trying something new and it doesn't work, that's a part of a culture that fails. Everybody has to feel like we're all in this together. Here's what I was thinking about all throughout our conversation here. And it started when I asked that question of every C-suite executive that comes on to the podcast. What are your two greatest challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth? 120 conversations, I've had that question answered now. Not one challenge has been based externally. Culture, you control it 100%. Yep. Nobody is telling you how to define your culture. Nobody is telling you how to create your own internal communication systems so two different departments aren't going into the same client recommending two different things. Nobody's telling you how to do that. Yep. Nobody is telling you how to internally align from the executive level on down. Nobody is telling you how customer obsessed you need to be, how proactive you need to be at that. Nothing we have talked about on this entire podcast so far has been external.
Yep.
Right.
Agreed.
We kind of tend to think of challenges like SWOT analysis, right? Where are the greatest challenges are going to be? Oh, our competition, what's going on out there, right? And market forces and dynamics and different things. But it really comes back to the fundamentals on how we want to build a business, how we want to operate, how we want to come together as a team. And my offer, right, does that resonate with you as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, again, it goes back to getting easily distracted, especially around the things you don't directly control. I always say as individuals, we control our mindset, our actions, and our reactions. To your point, in a company, you absolutely control 100% of what goes on internally there. But, and you used a few examples, it's really easy to let your organization get distracted by the marketplace, macroeconomics, competition, so forth and so on. And now, going back to where we started this conversation, we want to keep customer obsession and the client at the center of the equation, but that's how we get distracted, is through all the noise that we don't control out there. Now, all of a sudden, we're off our game because the client now, unbeknownst to us, and definitely not on purpose, is no longer at the center of the equation in what we're doing. So I think you bring up an outstanding point there.
We've covered so much territory already, but I have one last question, and it tends to be the hardest one. If there was one thing that you wanted the C-suite executives that will be consuming this podcast to take away from the conversation today, one thing you want to make sure, if you're going to leave with anything, leave with this. What would that one thing be?
I think pause on a regular basis. Take audit on a regular basis. You might not think you have the time or the convenience to do it, but you do. That's what I would say. Pause and audit. What does the organization look like when you start talking about being customer obsessed? What does it look like with the connective tissue within the company, the controls internally that you have to be a catalyst to delighting the customer and being obsessed around the customer? We're all running hard and fast, but if we're not stopping on a regular basis to consider the empty orange chair at the end of the executive or the boardroom table, then I think you're setting yourself up for a miss and a fall.
I got to tell you, the one thing I'm going to do, and I'm really physically going to do this, is I'm going to go to ChatGPT or something and say, create me an executive head of the table, big high back, orange chair image. And I'm going to do something old school. I'm going to print it out and I'm going to put it up on the wall right behind my monitor where I look every day, because we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to not lose focus of that. I love the recommendation to stop when you think you don't have the time to stop, because every day we have too much to do. The mission of this podcast, Greg, is to take different perspectives from different C-level executives from all over the world. We're all in B2B. We're all in an ABM go-to-market motion, but we can all learn from each other. And just that recommendation, if you take one thing away, pause, find the time to pause and think about what you're really doing and what's important. So important to do. I just want to say thank you for coming on and being a part of the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Excellent.